Keeper of the Lost Cities, Lodestar, Chapters 5 and 6. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to subscribe if you're not already. Give this video a like, and if you'd like to leave me a comment, let me know what you think your favorite Foxfire subject would be. I think that I would like the universe. Thanks. Chapter 5. You kids would sleep the day away if I let you, a wheezy voice grumbled, dragging Sophie out of her tangled dreams. She rubbed the crustiness from her eyes and waited for her vision to adjust to her still very dark bedroom. I thought you said dawn. And, whoa, you're back to the Forkle disguise? She hadn't seen the heavy-set figure standing in her doorway since the day he'd revealed his other identity. But there he was, looking wrinkled and puffy and reeking with the dirty feet scent of ruckleberries. Strangely, Sophie liked him better that way. This was the face she'd known her whole life, the nosy next-door neighbor who'd kept watch over her while she'd lived among humans, the elf who'd healed her abilities after they'd been damaged by a failed light leap, and fought at her side on Mount Everest, the elf who'd driven her crazy with his riddles and secrets, but who seemed to know her better than anyone. As I told you before, Mr. Forkle said, it's easier for me to compartmentalize my life, and when I'm in the Lost Cities, I rely on my established identities. But today we're going to the Stonehouse. The name launched sparks through Sophie's nerves. She'd only been to the isolated cottage twice, and neither were happy memories. One was the day they'd first brought Prentice home, when they'd discovered how severely his condition had deteriorated, and the other was when Calla had brought her there to deliver devastating news about the gnomish plague. You know, the last time I was there, you weren't in Forkle mode, she reminded him. She probably should have figured out his secret identity right then, but Magnate Leto had given her some story about how the Black Swan had brought him along to help cover for Tiergan and Wiley's visit. Sometimes it was better if she didn't think about how good he was at lying. That was for young Mr. Endell's benefit, Mr. Forkle told her. He's unaware of my other identities, and I'd prefer to keep it that way. Will Wiley be there today? Are you hoping to avoid him? Seeing Wiley tended to be unpleasant. He'd spent the majority of their conversations blaming her for every horrible thing that had happened to his dad. But their last talk hadn't been as awkward. I just want to be prepared, she said. I'm sure he's wondering why I haven't healed Prentice yet. Actually, Wiley came to us after his father woke, begging us not to perform the healing until we understand why Prentice slipped away. He's terrified of undoing what little progress his father has made. So remember, you and Mr. Vacker are going there to retrieve, not heal. Wait, Fitz is here? She scrambled to cover her frumpy pajamas and accidentally launched poor Iggy off the bed. He flapped his black bat-like wings and shook his tiny blue arms as he flew to the top of her canopy and glared down at her. Mr. Vacker's waiting downstairs, Mr. Forkle said, snapping his fingers to turn on the lights. And your imp looks like he's plotting revenge, so I'll leave you to get ready. But do try to hurry. I'd prefer to get out of here before sunrise. Sophie tried not to think about how early that meant it was, or how little she'd slept as she stumbled out of bed and threw on a simple tunic and pants. You might want to consider a hairbrush, Sandor warned as she passed him on her way to the stairs. Sophie rarely gave much thought to her appearance, but Sandor's twitchy smile made her rush to the nearest mirror. A tiny face appeared in the corner and immediately burst out into laughter. What'd you do? Get zapped by a charger? Verdina asked, swishing her silky dark hair. Sophie glared at the spectral mirror, wishing she could tell Grady and Adeline to get rid of the obnoxious piece of technology. But the mirror had once belonged to Jolie, and Vertina had occasionally proven herself useful. Plus, her hair did look like the top part of a pineapple. You're making it worse, Vertina said, as Sophie tried brushing out all the tangles. Go grab a box of hairpins and let me save you from this impending disaster. Sophie was tempted to ignore her. Vertina would disappear the second she stepped out of the mirror's range, but she let Vertina walk her through how to put her hair up into some sort of sleek, twisty ponytail. Aren't I a genius? Vertina asked as Sophie tucked the final strand. You actually are, Sophie begrudgingly admitted. Okay, now for makeup. Go get Sophie stepped out of range, done with the primping. "Whoa," Fitz said as she made her way down the stairs. "I didn't recognize you for a second." "Bad hair day," she mumbled, fidgeting with the ends of the ponytail. "No, it looks good," he promised. "It really draws attention to your eyes." She knew Fitz probably meant it as a compliment, but she'd never gotten used to being the only brown-eyed elf. Why couldn't the side effect of her tweaked jeans have been green eyes or purple? "You should do that more often," Grizzle said, emerging from her hiding spot in the shadows. "It'll drive the boys wild." Maybe. Attention made Sophie sweaty and fidgety, especially attention from Fitz. He was studying her so closely, she finally had to ask, "What?" "Just checking for cuts or scrapes, making sure he didn't hurt you." "You mean Keith?" Fitz cringed at the name, his hands also curled into fists, the knuckles turning white from the pressure. Sophie turned to Mr. Forkle. "Can we have a minute?" Mr. Forkle nodded and led Sandor and Grizzle into the other side of the room. Sophie motioned for Fitz to take a seat next to her on the sofa and decided it would be easiest to talk telepathically. She gave him permission to enter her mind. He and Mr. Forkle were the only ones who could, and he effortlessly slipped past her mental blocking. Apparently she had a point of trust, and if someone transmitted the right thing, it worked kind of like a mental password. But it all happened subconsciously, so she still had no idea what they did. "Okay," Sophie thought, sitting her hands so she couldn't tug on her eyelashes. "We have to talk about Keith. I know you don't want to, but the more we ignore it, the more it's going to affect our ability to work as cognates." All of their training focused on being open with each other. Their ultimate goal was supposed to be no secrets at all. "Are you sure it's a good idea?" Fitz asked. "We both know I say stupid stuff when I'm angry." "Are you angry?" she asked. "I know you are at Alvar, and I'm with you on that. But are you sure that's what you're feeling towards Keith?" Did he or did he not destroy part of Foxfire yesterday?" "Yeah, but it wasn't like how you're picturing." In his mind, Keith looked like a proper villain, laughing as the glass rained down. "Just watch, okay?" She rallied her concentration and replayed what actually happened, from the moment she stepped into Magneto's office to the final shattering words. Her photographic memory painted the scene in perfect detail, and she left nothing out. "Okay, so maybe it's not as bad as I thought," Fitz reluctantly admitted, "but I still think you should have sucker punched him as soon as he spun around in the chair." "I thought about it," Sophie admitted, tracing her fingers across the wide bracelet Dex had given her to make her punches stronger. "But I'm glad I heard him out." Fitz sighed. "I guess that's why he went to you instead of me." "Does that bother you?" "No." There was a strange prickliness about that thought, though. "What would you have done if he left a note for you instead of me?" Sophie asked. Fitz flopped back on the pillows and stared at the cascading crystal chandelier. "I have no idea." "Are you sure?" Sophie pressed. "I can feel the words bubbling in the back of your mind. Just let them out. I can take it." Fitz chewed his upper lip. "Fine. I don't trust Keith. I know you want me to, and I know I probably should, since he's my best friend, and he's been through a ton of hard stuff. But he also has a lot in common with my brother. Shoot, he used to call Alvar his hero." Keith didn't know Alvar was part of the Neverseen when he said that. Maybe not, but it still makes me sick. Did you know that Alvar went to your planting in the Wanderling Woods, after he drugged you and tied you up, staged the cave to make everyone think you drowned? Then he stood there, with his hand on my shoulder, and offered to let me borrow his stupid handkerchief. And later that night, he snuck back to the Neverseen's hideout and helped them torture you." The skin on her wrists stung, phantom pain left from the interrogation. "Brant was the one who questioned me," she reminded him quietly. "Yeah, but Alvar let it happen. He knew what they were doing. Probably heard you screaming." He punched one of the fluffy pillows so hard, bits of feathers swirled through the air. "You're right," Sophie said, as the fluff slowly started to settle. "But that was Alvar. You can't keep lumping him together with Keith. Your brother is I don't even know. I don't understand why he would turn his back on his family or do such unimaginably awful things, but Keith really is trying to help us. He's in over his head, and his plan is probably full of a bunch of holes, and I'm betting we're going to need to save him before this is over, but his heart is still in the right place. I have to believe that. Fitz shook his head. How do you stay so trusting after all you've been through? It's not always easy. Her hands moved to rub the emotions tangled under her ribs. Did I ever tell you what happened with Counselor Bronte? Remember how much he used to hate me? Yeah, I used to hear my mom and dad whisper about what they'd do if Bronte got you expelled or banished. He tried really hard, and when the council made him my inflicting mentor, I was pretty sure that would do it. It got so bad that Kenrick had to be there to make sure Bronte wasn't hurting me during the lesson. But then, Bronte made me teach him how I inflict positive emotions. And the happiness I blasted into his mind caused this weird mental shutdown. I still don't know how to explain it. But I had to pull his consciousness back, and his head was seriously one of the scariest places I've ever been. She shuddered just thinking about it. After that, I figured things would get way worse between us, she continued. But somehow, Bronte ended up becoming one of my only supporters on the council. I didn't know what caused the change until after the whole ability restrictor nightmare. Bronte sent me a message through Magnate Leto. He told me, it takes a special person to see darkness inside of someone and not condemn them. But the funny thing was, I had condemned him. I'd decided he was a traitor. I'd even asked Keith to go all empath lie detector on him to see if we could find proof that he was leaking confidential information from the council. So, now I try to be the person Bronte thinks I am. Which is why I'm not ready to give up on Keith. Not yet. I guess that makes sense, but I'm not trying to change how you feel. In fact, maybe it's better this way. I'll be the believer, and you can be the skeptic, and we'll keep each other in check. But that only works if you're honest with me and actually talk about stuff. He sighed. There you go, being all practical and wise. Hey, one of us has to be. He laughed at that and reached over to give her ponytail a playful tug. She moved to block him, and their rings snapped their hands together, which should have been startling enough without Mr. Forkle asking, I take it the hand-holding means you've worked things out? I think so, Sophie mumbled, not looking at Fitz as she pulled her palm free. Very good, because we really do need to get going. The window of time that we can be away is closing by the minute. And you have your imparter just in case you need me? Grady asked Sophie as he strode in from the kitchen. Sophie showed him the silver gadget she'd tucked safely in her pocket. Imparters were the elves' much sleeker voice command version of a video phone. All will be fine, Mr. Forkle assured Grady. We're going to a secure location. Grady strangled Sophie with a hug anyhow. I keep thinking it's going to get easier, sitting back and letting you take risks, he told her. But every time I want to drag you back upstairs and barricade you in your room. That makes two of us, Sandor said. But I'll keep an eye on her. And I'll keep an eye on both of them, Grizzle said. Show them how it's done. Grizzle tossed her long hair, which she'd let hang loose that day, as Mr. Forkle pulled a pink pathfinder out of his cloak, making Sophie wonder how many types of leaping crystals the elves actually used. Blue went to the Forbidden Cities, green went to the Ogres, pale yellow to the neutral territories, and clear to the Lost Cities. She'd also seen the Black Swan use purple crystals, but this was the first time she'd seen a pale pink, and its hundreds of facets sparkled with different colors, like a diamond. Please tell me this isn't going to be like leaping with unmapped stars, Sophie begged. She'd experienced that particular misery several times, and really didn't have the energy to endure it again. No. The hint of opalescent is simply an added security measure, Mr. Forkle assured her. Now everyone lock hands. Their group formed quite the chain, with Sophie, Fitz, Mr. Forkle, Sandor, and Grizzle. You ready for this? Fitz asked. Of course she is, Mr. Forkle answered for her. This is what she was made for. Chapter 6. Prentice's normally rich brown skin had a grayish tint, and shiny streams of sweat trickled down his forehead and soaked his tangled dreadlocks. But he was awake. His cloudy blue eyes kept darting blankly around the room. Even his mumble-gurgle sounds were a huge improvement from his previous deathly silence. Still, Sophie understood Mr. Forkel's reason for keeping her away. Watching the strings of drool hang from Prentice's lips made her want to dive into his mind and call him back to reality. He deserved to be truly awake, not strapped to a bed so that his flailing limbs wouldn't send him crashing to the cold silver floor. All in good time, Mr. Forkel transmitted, and I'm not reading your mind in case you're worried. I know you well enough to know that your thoughts echo mine, but we must be strong. Everything okay? Fitz asked Sophie, as she gave Mr. Forkel a reluctant nod. She forced a smile and tried to look anywhere but at Prentice. The house was exactly as she remembered it, sleek and sterile and sparse and small. Sandor and Grizzle chose to patrol the moorish grounds to escape the low ceilings. The only pieces of furniture were the neatly tucked cot Prentice was resting on and a medicine-strewn table next to it. The rest of the space was floor-to-ceiling apothecary shelves and one narrow counter under the room's only window, covered in an elaborate alchemy setup. Is someone watching him? Sophie asked, studying the beakers on the burners, which were bubbling with some sort of smoky magenta liquid. Of course, a ghostly voice said from the loft hidden above. Seconds later, Wraith's silver cloak came swishing down the narrow staircase. Just his cloak, though his invisible body was clearly moving underneath the silky fabric. He used a trick called partial vanishing, hiding his body but not his clothes, to keep his true identity secret. All 5 members of the Black Swans collective had crazy nicknames to match their even crazier disguises. So far, Sophie and her friends had only managed to learn 2 of them, which were Mr. Forkel, being both Magnate Leto and Sir Aston, though he had admitted that he still had other identities they had yet to discover, and they knew Granite, Sophie said as a bizarre figure struggled up the staircase from the cramped basement below. He looked like a cracked, unfinished statue come to life, thanks to the chalky indurate powder he ingested for his disguise. Sophie knew him better as Tiergan. Her telepathy met her at Foxfire, and she still couldn't believe she'd trained with him for more than a year and never guessed he was secretly involved with the Black Swan. Squall already left, Mr. Forkel told Granite, and she won't be able to return for our evening's meeting. Mr. Forkel nodded. I had suspected that might occur. Squall used her ability as a froster to encrust herself with ice and obscure her identity, and whoever she was in real life seemed to make it very difficult for her to sneak away from the lost cities for long. Blur should be here momentarily, Granite added. Almost on cue, a smudged-looking figure passed through the solid wood of the cottage's front door. As a phaser, Blur could break down his body and walk through anything. But he only let himself partially reform in order to hide what he really looked like. All Sophie could see were the splotches of color and shadows in vaguely elf-like shape as he turned back to open the door for 2 familiar faces. You know, you could use the door like a normal person, Tam said as he stalked into the room. Where's the fun in that? Lynn asked, trailing behind her brother. She'd opened her mouth to say something else when she spotted Sophie and Fitz. Then there was a whole lot of hugging, while Tam settled for a nod, shrug, wave from the door. The twins looked a lot alike, especially with their silver blue eyes and the silver tips they had added to their jet black hair. But personality-wise, they were night and day. I wish I'd known you'd be here, Lynn mumbled. I was so happy to leave the house I didn't bother changing out of my training clothes. She fussed with the sleeves of her simple blue tunic, which were wet along the edges. She must have been practicing hydrokinesis. You look beautiful, Sophie promised. Lynn always did. All elves were inherently gorgeous, but Lynn was especially striking with her soft pink cheeks and lips contrasted against her dramatic eyes and hair. Tam was just as handsome, but with more edge on his style thanks to his jagged bangs and ultra-intense stare. Why aren't you letting Tam and Lynn leave Louveterre? Sophie asked Mr. Forkel. The same reason we haven't let you visit, he told her. Far too many people would love to find that hideout. Tam and Lynn had lived in the same tree houses that Sophie and her friends had stayed at while they were banished from the lost cities, hidden deep under the earth in a subterranean forest only the Black Swan knew how to access. They could have returned home when their banishment was lifted, but they chose to stay away from their family. Not surprising, considering their parents let them spend more than 3 years scrounging for food and living in tattered tents, instead of standing by Lynn's side as she adjusted to the strength of her ability. "Does this mean you're not going to Exilium anymore?" Fitz asked the twins. "No, they let us out for that," Tam told him, "but only with our dwarven stalkers." "Bodyguards," Blur corrected, "and they'll only surface if they hear trouble." "King Enki assigned 4 of his royal brigade to Tam and Lynn's charge," Granite clarified, as he made his way over to check on Prentice, who seemed completely unaware of the noise around him. The goblins have been spread a bit thin, between the forces they've stationed outside of Ravagog and the patrols in the Lost Cities, and honestly, it's better for Tam and Lynn to have a discreet form of cover at Exilium. "How's it going there, by the way?" Sophie asked. Lynn smiled. "It keeps getting better, thanks to you." Sophie shrugged, not sure she should be given all the credit for the changes. All she'd done was tell Counselor Orally what life was truly like at the neglected school. Orally had arranged the improvements herself. "I never thought I'd miss that place," Fitz said, "but some of the skills they taught us were pretty awesome." "We miss you guys even more," Sophie added. "Dex and Biana are going to be so jealous that we got to see you." "Seriously," Fitz said, "Biana was already super sulky that she couldn't come along with us this morning, so when I tell her we saw you guys, she's gonna flip." "All 4 of them have been nagging me to let them visit you 2 for weeks," Mr. Forkle added. "I'd wager they've broken Mr. Simpson's record for the most visits to the principal's office to plead their case." The name drop might as well have dragged a giant woolly mammoth into the room. Tam cleared his throat. "So, have you heard from him?" "You could say that," Fitz said, glancing at Sophie. "I saw him yesterday." She was hoping Tam could leave it at that, but of course he didn't. "I'm guessing there was drama?" "Mr. Simpson has chosen a very challenging path," Mr. Forkle said carefully. "But we're still hoping for the best, and I want you all to know that we're not trying to keep you separated from each other. But we have to protect Iluvatar. The Council is watching your pendant feeds very closely, and while they may not actively work against our order, we also cannot truly count them on our side." "I'm sure Dex could cover us sneaking away for a few hours," Sophie argued. "Mr. Disney's talents are especially creative," Wraith agreed, "but the Council's new measures are cleverer than you might expect. It took our technopath most of last night to set up the false feeds we're using right now, and it's only for a limited time. Besides, we need Dex concentrating on other things," Blur added. "Like what?" Sophie asked, surprised that Dex hadn't mentioned anything. Mr. Forkle shot Blur a look that seemed to say, "That was top-secret information," before his voice filled her head. "We've given Mr. Disney access to all of the eldest Mr. Vacker's registry records, hoping he'll be able to determine why the Neverseen went to such lengths to destroy the files." "Is that why they broke into the registry?" Sophie asked. "In part. The investigators were unable to determine if any additional files were accessed, but all of Brant Finton's Rise and Mr. Vacker's records were erased. It's quite fortunate we'd made our own copies before the break-in, and I'm sure you can understand why we asked Mr. Disney to keep this project quiet." "I know you're talking about me," Fitz said, when Sophie's eyes darted his way. "And you know I can eavesdrop in on what you're saying, right?" "But you won't," Granite told him, "because you respect Sophie too much to violate the rules of telepathy." Tam snorted. "Telepaths are weird," said the guy who doesn't trust anyone until he's read their shadow vapor, Lynn teased. Tam was a shade, which meant he could manipulate shadows, including the inner darkness everyone hid in their minds. He claimed he could tell whether someone was trustworthy simply by sensing how much shadow vapor he felt when he looked at their reading. It seemed to be true. Tam had doubted both Alvar and Keefe because they'd refused to submit to the test. Sophie was waiting for the "I told you so." "Just tell me what's going on," Fitz said, and Sophie could hear the desperation hidden in his voice. She sighed. "Dex is investigating your brother, trying to see if he can find anything out about the Neverseen, and they didn't tell us because..." She pointed to his hands, which were clenched into fists so tightly his thumb rings were cutting into his skin. It took Fitz 6 painful seconds to relax his grip, and when he did, he turned to Mr. Forkle. I want to know what he's found. Nothing at all at the moment. Another reason we've waited to tell you. If you don't believe me, you're welcome to speak to Mr. Disney directly. I will, Fitz assured him, and Sophie made a mental note to be there in case the conversation turned into an epic disaster. Now can we focus on the real reason we're all here? Mr. Forkel asked. Mr. Song, I've told you I don't want to be connected with my parents' name, Tam interrupted. Right. My apologies, Mr. Tam. Did Blur explain the plan? He said something about having me lift another veil, and I'm hoping I've been misunderstanding. You remember what happened last time? I do, Mr. Forkel said. Prentice finally woke up. Right, but after that, Tam pressed. I'm never going to forget those screams. Why was Prentice screaming? Sophie asked as Lynn reached for her brother's hands. It only lasted a few minutes, Mr. Forkel assured her, which was hardly reassuring. And I suspect it was from the influx of jagged memories released by the veil. Anyone else confused? Fitz asked. Very, Sophie said. In all the times she'd been in people's minds, she'd never felt any veils. Shadow vapor forms in layers, Tam explained. Only shades can sense them, and I like to think of them as veils, since they usually feel thin and wispy, and they're always covering things we're trying to hide. That's why I can learn so much from reading someone's shadow vapor. The more you have, the more secrets you have. But the veils of darkness in Prentice's mind felt like they were made of solid metal. It took all my energy to lift one, and when I did, his consciousness surged back as it released the memories hidden underneath. All those years of exile and madness must have buried him in the darkness, Granite said quietly. I just wish I understood what caused the final avalanche. We'll figure it out, Mr. Forkel promised. But today we need to focus on peeling back another veil, which should be lighter now that we've lifted the layers that smothered him. The piece of memory I recovered was tethered to something else, something weighed down by the darkness. Hopefully, if we can remove the veil, Miss Foster can find it. But what if it makes Prentice worse? Sophie whispered. Believe me, I've asked that question 1,000 times, Granite told her. But last time, the process made him significantly better. So it stands to reason that lifting another veil might actually help him. Out of everyone in the room, Granite had the strongest connection to Prentice. He'd resigned from Foxfire after Prentice's memory break, and despised the Vacker family for years because of Alden's involvement with what had happened. He'd also adopted Wiley and raised him as his own son. So if Granite thought it was worth the risk, it had to be a good sign. Have you told Wiley we're doing this? Sophie asked. Mr. Forkel nodded. He gave us his blessing. Then why isn't he here? Fitz asked. Knowing something is the right decision doesn't always make it easier, Granite reminded him. But he trusts me to protect his father, and I will. As will I, Mr. Forkel said. As I'm sure you will as well, Miss Foster, and you, Mr. Tam. We all have the same goal. Tam sighed. What memory were you trying to find? The remaining portion of the symbol. I found one piece during my ill-advised search, and we've now found part of it etched into a disc connected to the Neverseen, which, by the way, tested negative for any enzymes, in case you were worrying, he told Sophie. It's made of a stone called duskatine, which is neither rare nor valuable, but it does react to starlight, which may be a clue to its purpose, though at the moment I'm still at a loss for what it could be. Perhaps once we have the rest of the symbol, all will become clearer. Can I see the full piece of the memory you've already found? Sophie asked. He shuffled to her side and placed 2 fingers on each of her temples, sending the scrap of jagged darkness surging into Sophie's mind. The chill made her shiver as the memory emerged from the shadows. White symbols glowing through the dark. 3 diagonal lines, each decorated with different patterns of dashes, before they ended in open circles. The lines in the center matched the disc from Keith's cloak. It's possible we're missing more than one piece, Mr. Forkel warned. How will I know if I've found them all? Send anything you find to me, Fitz offered. I'll piece them together and let you know when you're done. And if you need an extra boost, just squeeze my fingers. He offered her his hand, And after their months of working together, relying on Fitz felt like putting on a pair of comfy running shoes. "Are we ready?" Mr. Forkle asked. Everyone turned to Tam. He shook his bangs out of his eyes and let go of his sister's hand. "I really hope we don't regret this." "As do we all," Granite whispered. Tam's shadow sprang to life, crawling slowly across the room until it fell across Prentice's face and sank into his mind. That concludes chapters 5 and 6. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!